Everybody, thanks so much for listening to us here on Fire Breathing Rob. If you are listening to us on the radio, we thank you for that. If you're listening to us on Twitter, Facebook, on one of the podcast hosting sites, we also appreciate. Please subscribe, like, share this, and also hit the bell if you're listening to us on YouTube so you get all the other interviews that are coming up. We definitely notify people if they do hit that bell. I appreciate you guys and thanks so much. All right, so we will talk about with Harlan Accola. We're going to be talking about reverse mortgages, how it affects young people, and obviously how it affects our elderly in general. So Harlan, thanks so much for coming on. Greatly appreciate it.
Awesome to be here. Thanks, Rob.
So can you tell the viewers really and the listeners also what reverse mortgages are and how they really affect people in general?
Yeah, so everybody kind of looks at them as something pretty complicated, but in reality, it's kind of a lot simpler than what people think. For example, my 31-year-old son just bought a house. And he was driving back from the closing and he called me up and he said, Dad, come on over. We're going to move now. And I hate moving, but I obviously helped him. And he said, hey, Dad, I just started on my reverse mortgage. And that was kind of weird because you can't get one till you're 62. So how did he start on his reverse mortgage? Well, in the same way that he started on his 401k and his IRA, you put money into an investment for the purpose really of taking it out at some time in the future. Nobody would buy a house if it didn't go up in value. If you knew you're going to buy a house for 500 grand and it was going to be worth 200,000 when you died, nobody would buy one. But the fact is that it is a regular mortgage allows you to take cash, put it into the house over a period of 15 or 20 or 30 years. And then when you get older, the reverse mortgage allows you to take the money back out. It's really that simple, but most people don't want to take it out because they want to save that money in their house and only give it to the kids after they die, which is really strange, but it's a custom and it's conventional wisdom. And when I talk to seniors, they say, well, just a minute, I don't want to do a reverse mortgage because I'll lose my equity and then I don't give my kids as much. The goal is it should not be to give your kids a house when you die because they don't want it. They're going to sell it as quickly as possible because they don't want to pay all the expenses that go with the house. So reverse mortgage simply allows me to access my equity in the form of cash before I die, rather than waiting until after I die when I give the house to my kids. I can use it to help my kids or my grandkids go to college or for them to buy their own house. I just sold a house that I owned for 30 years. When I bought that, my dad helped me. It was important that he helped me while he was alive. That was a lot more valuable to me than the inheritance that I received when he died. So that's where people get confused as to what a reverse mortgage is. It's not something that kills your equity. It's something that allows you to use it.
So how did it get that bad stigma, that everybody, personally, I know people that actually we have a family friend up the road that was actually looking at doing a reverse mortgage. But then I have all these other people saying, oh, it's a bad idea. It's not a good idea. So where did that stigma come from?
Well, it kind of came from all these old movie actors that you started talking about. Fred Thompson, the Fonz, now Tom Selleck. Our company doesn't use any of that. I hate that stuff because it just makes it kind of like you're, now they're going to hawk Ginzu knives or something next. And it's just, no, don't put those guys on again. And so the issue is that the reason that it got a bad name is really because of two things. In the beginning, 1988, when they first came out, they were used primarily by people as a loan of last resort. Dad died, mom's 75, 80 years old. She doesn't have money. She needs money to be able to just stay alive and get food and stay in the house. So a lot of people that had bad credit were in difficult situations that probably shouldn't have been in their houses anymore, ended up getting a reverse mortgage, and then they couldn't pay their taxes. Like people in New York and New Jersey sometimes have to pay $10,000, $15,000 for their taxes, even if their house is paid off. And so if you don't pay your taxes, you get foreclosed on. So here the industry that was supposed to help the old people is now taking the old people and kicking them out of their house. Right. And that was horrible. It was never designed to do that, but people were going to lose their houses anyway because they couldn't afford to pay the taxes. And then when the reverse mortgage company foreclosed on them, it looked really bad. The second thing that gave it a really bad name was when older guys married younger women, took their wives off from title because you get money according to your age, and then they died and their young wives got kicked out of the house. That was really bad press. Those are the two major things which have been fixed, but it doesn't matter. Just Google it and there's all kinds of stuff all over about it.
Right. So did any of 2008 with the housing crisis at that time, did any of that have something to do with the bad press of reverse mortgages?
It did. That's when it came to a head, and that's when it really needed to get fixed, because the bottom line is that that's when people were hurting the most, not paying their taxes, and that's when a ton of foreclosures happened. And when those foreclosures happened, which it did for young people too,
right?
But it got a lot more press when elderly people got kicked out of their house because they're a protected class. And so it looked bad, but those people were actually better off, because if you're a millennial and you end up getting foreclosed on and you're upside down in 2009, nobody thinks about that now. But back in 2009, you owed 500,000, your house is only worth 350. You just walked away from it. But the bank came after you for the other 150 grand that you didn't pay. With a reverse mortgage, you're protected, and we never go after, that's FHA, Federal Housing Administration protects it, and you never end up being upside down. So our clients that died in 2009, 2010, many of them upside down, they never ended up with a lien against their kids or their other assets. My uncle died in 2010, $30,000 upside down in his house, never had to pay the difference because it was taken care of by the Federal Housing Administration. So it is actually a very safe mortgage if you simply can pay your taxes. And even if you go upside down, you won the game. If I die owing more on my house than what it's worth, I got more out of my house than what it paid me. That's a great situation to be in.
Is it a good time to do that now with the, the housing market really going berserk in plain English? So would it be a good time to get a reverse mortgage now, or is it not a good time?
Well, Rob, I'm 61 and I am a year away from my own reverse mortgage. And it's driving me nuts because I've been doing this for 18 years for other people. And the best ever time to do a reverse mortgage is this year, because the values are high and the interest rates are low. That's never happened in the history of the country. So it is a fantastic time to turn some of that equity into cash, because remember, most people think they're losing their house, and that's not the case. If I take out a reverse mortgage and I pull 100 grand out to, help out my kids and my grandkids, and my house is worth $500,000, and I die the next day, my kids still get the 400 that's left. I didn't lose my house. So the only amount that the kids will have to pay back is the amount, the 100 grand that I used, plus any interest that accrued. So this is by far the best time, because you've got people. I just talked to a lady in California. My goodness, they bought their house for 300 grand 25 years ago. It's worth 1.3 million. That's their best investment, but it's worthless to them because they're not pulling anything out.
Right. So how is the value, and this is off the record, or maybe we can even put this on. I'm just trying to kind of grasp. I understand what you're saying, but like, say the house is worth 1.3 million now, and say the person dies in 10 years and the housing market slowly goes back down to normal. Say that house goes to $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. How does that affect the market with how does that affect the mortgage, rather, as far as the money that they can get out of that?
So there's only two things that can happen at the end. You've got equity left and your house is worth 1.3 and you've only used 200,000. The kids get 1.1, the money that's left. So if it's good, the money goes to the children or whoever the heirs are.
Okay.
However, if it's bad and the house went down to 600,000 and mom and dad lived for a long time and they've used $700,000 out of their reverse mortgage because they've been getting payments for 30 years, that difference is forgiven. There's no equity left, but they didn't lose anything. So you're guaranteed not to lose. I was just out for a conference in Las Vegas, and you can go into casinos and you can lose money. But the reverse mortgage, when you go into the scenario, you're not guaranteed to win. but you're guaranteed not to lose, which is a huge issue. You're protected against the downside. So if the housing market crashes and you die in a year like 2010, it's no skin off your nose or your heirs. Your heirs aren't going to have to bring in and start writing checks or give up your other assets. But if it's run really well and your house is worth a whole bunch more than what it was back in 2020 when you did it, 2021, that's good because the kids get the difference. If it's good, the money goes to the children. If it's bad, the bill goes to FHA. So you are guaranteed not to lose. If there was a casino that said you're guaranteed not to lose, I would have played in that casino all day long.
I hear you. So Harlan, my thing is, you spoke about your son getting that reverse mortgage. Are you seeing a lot of young people do that? Or is that just because your son kind of knew what was going on because you've probably, I'm sure, talked to him about this and what's going on with the market and mortgages in general?
Well, let me go back to that. He's not 62, so he can't, I didn't really finish that story. He's not 62, so he can't get a reverse mortgage, but he got a regular forward mortgage, which he's got to pay out $1,800 a month for the next 30 years. So he's got to take his cash and he's got to give $1,800 bills every single month into his mortgage. Mm-hmm. But the reason that he says he started his reverse mortgage is 31 years from now when his house is paid off or partially paid off, and now his house is worth $800,000 or $900,000, he's got a whole boatload of equity, which is worthless. It looks real, it looks kind of like money, but it's fake. And the fact is that then he's going to be able to take that equity that he's created over the last 30 years and turn it back into cash. He looks at his house that way from the beginning, and very, very few people do, except for the people that are educated on reverse mortgages. When I understood this 18 years ago, I said, whoa, I'm not going to pay off my house any faster than I have to, because I want to just gradually pay it down and I want to invest money in other areas, because I know that when I turn 62 in 2022, I'm going to be able to pull that money back out. So what my son did is he said, yeah, I want to buy a house because I want a place to live. But I also understand that it's an investment, but it's a horrible investment if I can't get the money out. Imagine him walking into his financial planner when he turns 62 and say, hey, I've been paying money into my IRA for the last 30 years or my 401k. I'd like some money back. And the financial advisor says, oh no, that's not for you. That's for your kids. You can't have any of that. Just keep paying money in. And when you die, we'll send the money to your kids. He'd be ticked at his financial advisor. Yet that's what most people look at their house investment as. I'm going to pay it down, I'm going to pay it off, and then I'm going to give it to my kids when I'm 95 and I'm dead. That doesn't make sense. That goes against conventional wisdom, and that's why nobody wants to do it. But the fact is that everybody, especially the kids, would be better off, because when I get to be 62, I have 4 sons in their 20s and 30s. When I get to be 62 and I start pulling money back out of my house, I'm losing equity. I'm giving up equity every day that goes by, but I'm gaining cash because I'm not pulling money out of my investments, out of my annuities, out of everything else. So when I die, my kids will get less equity, but they will have more cash. They'll get more investments. They'll get more life insurance. They will get more money from me now. In fact, I'm taking them on vacation. Every 2 years, we take them on vacation and pay for all of it. Now, that's going to give them a smaller inheritance, but that's money that I otherwise would have been paying. My house payment being $2,000 a month, that's $24,000 a year. You can do a great vacation for $24,000 a year. Not that we always spend that much, but I'm giving it to the kids while I'm alive. I'm not putting it in the house and giving it to them when I'm 95 and they're 70.
Right. I know we're bouncing around a little bit in the interview, but I do want to get to a couple of other things. You talked about the housing market right now and how it's really a buyer's market. Obviously, there's, with the coronavirus, there's not a lot of lumber and there's a lot of stuff that it's tough to find right now because of the shortages. With that said, do you feel like, because this is what I'm hearing on the news and listening to different pundits on the right and the left, is that they're saying that this is a renter's market now, that the U.S. is trying to make it a renter's market, not people buying and owning homes. Are you seeing that as far as in mortgages, that it's, people have these jobs and they're not making enough money to, buy a house. If you're working at McDonald's making $13, $14, $15 an hour, you can't buy a $500,000, $600,000 house. And that's what a lot of these, even some of these houses, they're really outrageously priced because the supply is not there. So do you think it's going to be a renters economy fairly soon, if it isn't already in a lot of our cities and even in the towns around the country too?
Well, we were pushing before 2008, we were pushing home ownership. We're getting close to 65, 70%. And obviously that's declined since then because of all the foreclosures and a massive, I wouldn't say the US or the government is trying to make it a renter's economy, but it's naturally becoming that because of economics, because there's a certain amount of investors that can afford to buy these homes. And there's a certain amount of people that are making enough money that they can afford to buy these homes. Like in the tech area, the growth in the tech area has specifically caused the spike in values. But I see a huge silver lining here, because I travel all over the country with the company that I work with, Fairway. We have 600 offices from California up to Maine, and Fort Lauderdale way up to Seattle. And so I see all of these different markets. When everything changed, all four of my sons still work from home, and they all went to offices before. Now you can go to a rural area. For example, I grew up in Marshfield, Wisconsin. You can still get a 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch for $150,000 to $200,000. Like one guy that came there once, he said, "They're giving houses away here. What's the deal?" So we have internet. There's a lot of cows in central Wisconsin, but we have internet and we have office buildings, and we've got all of the things that grocery stores and things like that people need. And so the ability for people to move to a different area and work remotely has never been a better opportunity. We're hungry for workers. If somebody says, "I want to come to work for you, but I'm not going to move from my Podunk, Missouri home," okay, that's okay. We'll figure out a way to make sure that you've got good enough internet so you can work for us. And so I think that if people realize that, hey, I don't have to buy in the Bay Area, I don't have to buy in Phoenix, I can go to northern Arizona, or I can go to Idaho, or I can go to some of these other areas that are nice areas, just not as expensive. Florida isn't nearly as expensive as New York and New Jersey, and that's why obviously a whole bunch of people move down there. So is it harder to buy a house now? Yes, but it just depends on where you're looking, and that's a huge difference. And that's why I want to make sure I tell every millennial that I can talk to that are in their 20s and 30s, buy a house. I don't care if it's going to go up and down in value. I see the end result. I see people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and I can tell you the people that did not buy a house when they're in their 30s are in way worse financial situation than the people that bought a house when they were young.
Harlan, I want to talk about this because we've been kind of talking about this, and my thing is with the housing market, and you've talked a little bit about this in the last answer, that a lot of these people, I'm hearing this down in Florida. We have some neighbors that are trying to buy houses, refix them up and flip them. So I feel like we're seeing a lot of that now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but besides the flipping, this is here in Florida and Orlando, we're also hearing people that a lot of private equity firms are buying a lot of these houses, and they're outbidding, doing cash offers. And that's really putting a lot of these people that are millennials, basically shit out of luck, because they can't compete with cash offers, and they can't compete with, and that's what my friend was saying too. I know it was a big mistake, and I agree with you that he should have got his house inspected, but he was telling me if he got his house inspected, they had like 7 or 8 other orders that were ready to go and just deal. So, my question, I guess, is are you hearing that about private equity, that they're just buying up houses with cash offers? A lot of people are flipping houses, and they're just putting these regular middle-class people out of it.
Yeah, there's no question. And that goes back to your other question about the renters economy. Is that being created because the big investors that have cash are shoving out some of the smaller ones? Without question, that is definitely happening there. I don't know the statistics, but we are at a higher higher number of investors buying houses than ever before in the history of the country. Single family homes. That it's one thing for an investor to own a 20-story apartment building, but it's quite another to own 200 single family homes. That never happened before. I never saw that growing up. That would be a highly unusual thing for anything other than a local investor to buy a house and rent it out. Even usually then they had duplexes or 4 units or whatever if there was a small investor. But that is definitely causing a problem. So a lot of people say, well, I think it's overvalued and I think this is a bad time to buy a house. Well, it could be. It's kind of like the stock market. We want to look at it the same way. Does the stock market go up and then down and up and then down? Yes. But if you're paying, you got to pay to live anyway. So if you're paying $2,000, $3,000 a month to live somewhere and rent, you're paying somebody else's mortgage. I always tell people, you're going to pay a mortgage no matter what. You might as well pay your own. At least you're going to gain some equity back. So is it tougher now? Yes. But if you select the area and you think about it and you don't get emotional about it and say, oh man, we got to buy that because it's got just a beautiful kitchen, and just go nuts and you walk in the open house. We even run some ads of people, going in with swords and their armor and going in with kung fu moves and knocking out the other, buyers. If you don't get emotional about the thing and you properly look around, you are going to be starting a nest egg. And even though I just went over with my son, he bought a house for about $1 million and in a nice area of a suburb of Minneapolis. And I said, hey, Luke, it could go down. It might go down to 900, but maybe it'll go down to 800. But over a period of time, it's eventually going to go up because it comes down to supply and demand. The only time I think housing is really going to go down is when all the baby boomers start dying. Because let's not forget, and that's about 25, 30 years. Let's not forget that there's 10,000 of us a day turning 62, and some of us buy second homes. And we're selling our smaller houses or the houses we raised our kids in and buying the houses in the 55 plus communities and the villages and that kind of thing. So you can, play a pickleball and all that sort of thing. So the issue is that you're not going to see the housing market decrease. If you look at the MBA figures and all of the numbers, Case-Shiller, the housing market is not going to dramatically decrease for at least 20 to 30 years. There's going to be dips, but it's going to continue to go up. It has to because of the number of people that are alive. There was 200 million people alive when I was born. There's about 300 million people alive now. So that means you need more houses. The builders can't build them fast enough. Of course, you got lumber issues and everything else. But as they come out, it's just like the cars. All the cars went up in value because there's not as many because of the chip shortage. But that's a short-lived thing. You can build a car a lot faster than you can build a house.
Harlan Accola here on Fire Breathing Rob. Harlan, I want to talk about this because you brought up a good point about, baby boomers dying off. We're seeing a little bit of that right now. But my question is, what is going to happen? Because I think it's going to be a real big crisis because we're seeing millennials get married later on in life. We're seeing millennials have less kids. So, when you have all these houses and stuff like that, I know right now there's not enough houses to fit the market, but eventually, like you said, the trend is going to turn the other way. And then what's going to happen when these, people are not having kids as far as millennials and the Gen Z crowd aren't having a lot of kids, they're waiting to get married. There's going to be a huge crisis in this country where we're going to have more houses than there are needed.
Well, I don't care I don't care if somebody's got an MBA. I don't care how smart people are. Everything comes down to supply and demand. And the government messes with that sometime, but sooner or later, it all comes back to supply and demand. So you're 100% right. For the first time, I think it was a couple of years ago, don't quote me on this directly because I've got to take a look at that, but people were not replacing themselves anymore. They're having like 1.9 kids to a couple. And so that means that you're not going to have as many. So everything in the housing market over the next 30 years depends on how many kids your generation has. So we know the millennials, there was a bubble there. There's a big bubble from 1946 to 1964. The baby boomers have run the economy ever since 1946 when my dad came home from the war and married my mom in the pictures behind me. That started the baby boomer thing. And then I was kind of the end of the baby boomers at 1964. I've told my kids, watch the housing market carefully and start looking at selling your house in about 25 years and buying it back after there's a crash, unless a whole bunch more kids are born or we take on a lot more immigrants than what we expect.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on how many people are alive. And if you're going from 300 million to 400 million and then back to 350, there's going to be a crash and there's going to be too many houses for too few people. But if that doesn't happen and millennials start having more kids, that will make a dramatic difference. So I have 4 kids. That's unusual for any. Very few millennials have more than 2 or 3.
Right,
and
right.
so the issue is that watch that carefully. But until my generation, the end of my generation, as the baby boomers start dying off, you are not going to see a dramatic decrease in the values of homes. It cannot happen. There's going to be dips like that are messing around with stupid financing, things like happened back in 2008. Those things are going to happen, but almost everybody's house is worth more than what it was back in 2008, even though it was high back then.
Do you believe that this is a bubble, or there's going to be a crisis regardless, even if this isn't a bubble, because of that issue with the moratorium?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And there's 2 things to look at on that, one for people of your age and one for people of my age.
Sure.
Is there a possibility that there is a temporary bubble? Everything I talk about as real estate is going to go up is based over a 25, 30 year time period. That doesn't mean that my home is going to be worth more a year from now or 2 years from now than what I paid for it today. However, if you're not getting in and out of the housing market and you're looking for a place to live and you're looking at a long-term plan, it really doesn't matter. If you buy a good company, if you go out and invest, remember the tech or the big tech bubble in 2000?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, people were paying obscene amounts of money for somebody that had nothing more than pets.com. I mean, that's all it was. And all of a sudden it was worth $1 billion. Well, it wasn't. And so the fact is if you're buying good companies over a long period of time, you're going to be okay. But if you're paying too much for something that is ridiculous and it doesn't have an underlying value, that's different. So if somebody said, I'm going to pay rent for another couple, 3, 4 years and wait for the housing market to go back down, I would argue that you're going to lose equity in that time period, because we added up with my son with low interest rates. If interest rates go up by even 0.5%, he's going to end up not paying as much equity into his home. And we figured that even if his home went down by 20% over the next 5 years, he would be better off at the current low interest rate of 2.75%, or whatever it was that he got at the end. He would be better off with his overall wealth because of what he built in equity, even though he lost some equity because he had to pay rent anyway. And it's not like a stock that you can not, it doesn't cost you anything to not buy it. So that's the first thing. Is there going to be a temporary problem? Maybe, although everybody's hungry for workers, and anybody that really wants to work can work. And so a lot of people lost their jobs in 2008 and there wasn't anything out there and people were begging for jobs.
Right.
That's probably not the case now because of the great need there is for workers. And it's always hard to find people to work. And so I don't see as big a downturn, and the fundamental market is not encouraging. Everything got too tough, Rob, on lending, because in 2008, if you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan. I mean, there was very low. There were liar loans, we called them, and ninja loans. No income, no assets, no job. Just here, you got a social security number, you're breathing, here's a loan. You want 90%, 95%, yeah, we'll just throw some money in. And watch The Big Short. That really happened. That was real. That wasn't Hollywood, that was real. We don't have that in place anymore. There's much stronger regulations than there ever was. Now, that's for the young people. So would I wait? No. I told all 4 of my kids to buy a house in the last 3 years. And so I would not wait, because I bought my first house at 16.5% interest in 1981. My kids are buying it at 2.75. That in itself is a little bit different. I think I took $2 off every time I had a payment. Now, for older people and for the millennials' parents, they need to, with these high numbers, they need to get a reverse mortgage in place and not pull the money out, but set up a line of credit so they have access to their cash. Because when the COVID hit, all of a sudden, all the lines of credit went away and you couldn't get any cash out refis. So if somebody had $1 million house and they were retired and they were 70, they couldn't get money on their house unless they had a reverse mortgage. It is foolish for people that are older not to put that in place and install a faucet on the side of their house so they can get at that money. Because if forbearance hits, if things get worse, you can't get money out in a forward market, but you can in a reverse mortgage when you're over 62.
We're looking down here and you're looking for, you know, a house to rent out, like you said, and you can put people in there short term. Would you think it would be better off for a place like Orlando to have people in there? Because we do have a lot of people listening that are in this area. So it would be good advice for them if they do live down here full time. Would you, you know, put people in here short term or long term? Because you do have the snowbirds, you do have the Canadians that come down and stay for a couple of months. Or would you think it's better off to put somebody in there that's, you know, going to go to Disney, Universal for the week, and then they're going to cut out and go home?
Yeah, that's a very I mean, that's what a lot of people face. Great question. I know some people that are doing Airbnbs very successfully and doing all the short-term rentals. And one of my friends has 8 properties in Florida, specifically doing exactly that and doing very well. But when you're doing short-term rentals, you're either going to have somebody helping you if you've got another job, or you're going to need to devote time to it yourself. In his case, his wife doesn't work outside the house and she's awesome at talking to people, and she's got a couple little kids at home, and it's a part-time job for her, and she does an incredible job. And I said, you better pay her well, because you're not going to get any employee. You're not going to get a property manager that good. As long as you've got the time, short-term rentals are generally more valuable, because who's going to stop coming to Orlando? Right. And the snowbirds, who's going to stop doing that? You know, there's a bunch of old people in my age group that don't like 50 below wind chills in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and you go to Florida. And so, and certainly people Massachusetts and New York. So, and especially people now, they were renting Airbnbs for 2 months at a time. Yeah. Because they could, people like me that are still working, we could go down there and work in someplace warm rather than sitting boxed in the snow. So, however, if you don't have a lot of time and you don't want to mess with that kind of thing, there's no question that a long-term rental, I'm super busy in my business and always have been, so I only do long-term rentals. We did a short-term thing with a house in northern Wisconsin for a while that we had on the lake. And it was just a lot of work. I had a wife that took care of that too, but man, you know, sometimes she wouldn't even talk to me at night. She'd just throw the kids at me and say, hey, I've got to take care of the rental. And so it just depends on what you've got for time, because every investment that you make is followed by time or money or both. And you need to be prepared for it. Because even if you go into the stock market, you still got to talk to a financial advisor. You still got to figure out, what should I do? You talk to your spouse and say, is this going to work out? And what should we do here? And what kind of risks do we want? And should we sell now that the market went down or whatever? And so, and real estate is no different. You got to be prepared to spend time and money on any investment. And does that fit with the rest of your lifestyle? But my goodness, in Florida, yes, the market really went down back in 2008, but it's come back stronger. One of my best friends, an associate in the business, bought a home just north of Orlando in Winter Park. It's went up. That was 3 years ago. It's went up almost $100,000. He bought it for like $450. It's worth $550. So might it go back down? Yeah, but over the long time, the Villages has been successful for decades. And it's not going to stop. They're building 2,500 homes a year, new homes, not counting the resales. So it's not going to go away anytime soon, because you got a lot of gray-haired people like me that are still wanting to be someplace warm and have second homes.
This will go to the question, why do you think kids in my generation, for the most part, not all, this is a generalization, are more so not really financially independent, and also don't really know a lot about finances in general, whether it's, IRAs, buying houses, mortgages. A lot of kids don't know anything about that.
Well, there's two reasons. Number one, our school system doesn't teach anything. One of my sons went to law school, 3 years of law school, not one financial class, not one. 3 years of law school, 100 grand, and no financial classes. Really? So that's one of the first problems. They learn it generally from their parents or their friends. And their parents and their friends might know what's going on, and they might not. Apparently, you had great parents that taught you some of that stuff.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time teaching my kids about compound interest and the rule of 72s and the advantage. And that's why my son called me and said, "Hey, I just started my reverse mortgage, just bought a house." And so that's part of the problem, is that it's not taught in schools. The second part of the problem is it's really not taught in a way that is fun or sexy by the industry. When we have a young person come in, we talk to them about reverse mortgages on their first house, because we believe in begin with the end in mind. So that was one of the 7 habits of highly effective people that Covey wrote about years ago. And if you're going to begin with the end in mind, why should you put money into an IRA? Your friend who's an investment guy says, "Hey, if you put this much in, when you turn 65, you're going to have X dollars. And your Social Security is going to pay you X dollars, but you're going to be getting way more because you decided to invest in your IRA and because you put money aside in your nest egg for the future." We have done a horrible job in the real estate world of educating people as to why it's a good investment, because they see their parents, and their parents died and left them a house, and they sold it and they divided it up, and each kid got 60 grand or something, and it wasn't that big of a deal, and they didn't really understand how it worked. And so if we can explain, this is how IRAs work, this is how 401ks work, this is how a life insurance concept works, and this is how things work with housing as a real estate, another piece of investment of the money that's coming back in. We need to have the financial illiteracy is terrible in this country, because people would rather talk about the Kardashians or watch some stupid show on TV, or the latest, the NBA finals are cool right now, because I was 11 years old the last time the Bucks won a world championship. So it's kind of cool. But yes, I wasted a few hours over the last couple of weeks watching the finals, but people would rather do that and watch 15 baseball games instead of sitting down with somebody like me or a financial advisor like your friend to say, "Hey, let's make some plans for the future."
I don't know how much I trust my friend now, Harlan, after.
Well, don't take real estate advice from him, Rob. Not a good idea.
I'll tell you, that was crazy. I feel sorry for him, because he's going to lose he's putting so much money into that, and that's all that money's going down the drain. It's pretty sad, actually.
But there's 2 other people that screwed up on that, Rob, his realtor and his loan officer, because they are savvy and they know better than to do something like that. I wouldn't do a loan for a guy who's saying, "I don't want an inspection," because it doesn't mean you're not going to buy the house. It just means that you're going to have to stick 100 grand into it. There's nothing wrong with buying a house that's got problems with it, but that's just something that he should have got some expert advice. Just like he gives expert advice to people, he should have went to people that really could give expert advice, because that he only buys 1 or 2 or 3 houses in his lifetime. I've dealt with thousands of transactions, and you need to talk to somebody that has dealt with thousands of transactions and see the pitfalls over a period of years.
I agree 100%. Harlan Accola, I appreciate your time today, and definitely check out the book. We're going to put all that stuff in the description box. As we end the interview, Harlan, can you tell people where they can find you, and also where they can get the book?
Yes, it's on Amazon, or they can get it from any of our offices around the country. But the best way to reach me is on my email, and that's Harlan A, HARLANA, and wow, there goes the clock. Wow. So my email is the best way to reach me, and that's Harlan A, HARLANA at fairwaymc.com. That's Fairway Mortgage Corporation.com. And the book is on Amazon if they just Google it on Amazon. But I can, when we work with people, any of our clients get it for free, even if they don't buy something, a house from us or do a loan, just if they come in for a consultation. We love to visit with people all over the country, but probably the best way is to reach me at my email.
All right, Harlan, thanks so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Rob. I'm very jealous of you being in your 30s and buying real estate. Oh my goodness, if I knew then what I knew now. I'll give you at least $1 million for your age, Rob, if we could switch.
I hear you.